All right, good evening. We're going to call the regular council meeting of November 21st to order. And we have an amended agenda this evening, and it was amended just to add the question and answer period on the end. So if you picked up an agenda previously, there's no other changes to that. So I'd like to look for a motion to adopt the amended agenda. Thank you. All those in favor? All right. So we have two delegations this evening. Our first delegation is George and Terry Goulet from the Métis Association. Please come forward and address council. And make sure you pull the mic down to your mouth. Yeah, perfect.
Clahawi Tillicum, welcome friends. My greeting to you tonight is in Chinook jargon, or Chinook Wawa, the traditional Michif language of the Pacific Northwest. I would like to recognize the Sechelt Nation on whose lands this meeting is being held. And I'm only going to give you a short update on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. George will then give you a little bit of history, and then our president of the United Canadian Métis Nation, Ron Paradis, will speak to you. And after the proclamation is given, I will be handing out to you new papers that we've written on some type of topics that will be of interest to you and provide you with more information on the Métis people. The short update is that last year we handed out a paper on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And we were very concerned last year that there would be a problem with getting this legislation through the government. But we are happy to say tonight that it has passed third reading in the House of Commons. It is now up at the Senate for passing, and it's passed the second reading. After that, it will go down to the House again for final reading. But it has really progressed, and we are hoping to see that through and implemented as soon as possible. Now I'm going to ask George to give the history.
Thank you, Terry.
Good evening, councillors and mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you all from being elected in the last election. And I realize it's an entirely new council, except for the mayor, who, of course, was a councillor previously. Now, as you can tell from looking at me, I'm a Métis elder. I've written a few books with my wife, Terry, and I'm just going to read them all to you. I'll just tell you the titles of them. It's The Trial of Louis Riel, Justice and Mercy Denied. That was written 20 years ago. It's the Métis Memorable Events and Memorable Personalities. This went through three editions, and is now a Canadian bestseller. And we were commissioned by the Métis Nation, British Columbia, in 2006 or 7 to write a book on the history of the Métis in British Columbia for the 2008 BC 150 celebrations. And so that gives you some background on our connection with the Métis people. The Métis are mixed blood descendants of the European men who came to the West to trade in furs, and the indigenous women that they married according to the custom of the country. They have a unique history. They developed their own history, heritage, and culture, and that's what one of these books is about. So I'll just mention two of them. One is the Red River Resistance of 1869-70, led by Louis Riel, which resulted in Manitoba entering Canada. And he is considered today the father of Manitoba. The other was the Northwest Uprising of 1885, in which Riel was called in by the settlers in what is now Saskatchewan to lead them in their fight against the Canadian government for their grievances. At that time, the West was a second-class colony of Canada. They had no voting rights. They had no right to elect members to Parliament. They didn't have title to their land. The First Nations people were being, in effect, starved. And so Riel was called in to do this. Well, his reward for doing that was to be charged with high treason and executed in 1885. We think today Louis Riel should be exonerated because we wrote this 300-page book on the trial, went into it in great detail. I'm a retired lawyer. I have a Master of Laws degree from the University of Toronto, and my wife was a former researcher, so we did our research thoroughly. The trial was unjust, unfair, and illegal. It was under a 534-year-old statute of England, and it had no application in Canada. But in a small place like Regina with less than 1,000 people, they had no law library, no books to consult, and it went through as if it was okay. The Métis have fantastic symbols. I'll only mention two of them. One is the jigging and guitar playing and fiddle playing that they do. This happens every Saturday at the Davis Bay Community Hall, thanks to President Ron Parody taking an initiative on that. And we have to also thank Seashelt for being financial sponsors in part for that jigging class, which take place every Saturday except in the summertime. Another symbol is the Métis flag, which is more than 150 years older than the Canadian maple leaf flag. And that Métis symbol is flying outside this town hall today. Now the BC history in very brief form was that they came across the Rocky Mountains over 200 years ago with the great fur traders, Alexander Mackenzie, Simon Fraser, and David Thompson. And they built forts and outposts, which later became cities, towns, and villages in British Columbia. And just a few of them are Fort Victoria, Fort Nanaimo, Fort Kamloops, Fort Langley. And finally, as I said, we are pushing for the exoneration of Louis Riel. And the question is he a hero? Well, if a hero is one who forfeits his life fighting for the rights of his people and others in a just cause, Louis Riel fits that bill exactly. He fought for basic human rights and democracy for the West. And if you believe in basic human rights and democracy, then you believe he's a hero, not only to the Métis people, but to all Canadians who believe in those concepts. Long live the Métis. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And I actually have the Métis in British Columbia book, so if anybody's interested. Ron.
My turn. That's a hard act to follow. First off, congratulations to all of you on your elections. It's good to see new faces here and some familiar faces. I have to talk about November 16th, what our community pulling together and I'm a proud member of Seashelt. And when our flag goes up in a community like Seashelt, which has been going up for several years, it becomes very emotional for us Métis because it shows that communities like this, like Gibson's, Seashelt, throughout different communities throughout British Columbia and across Canada, as a matter of fact, they were raising the flag. And this has just started probably 5 years ago, where it has brought recognition for the Métis. And I have to say that Gibson's and Seashelt I think was the very first, raised our infinity flag, and we stand there very proud. And I have to say also on November the 16th here that couldn't be more proud to be living in this community. The parking lot was full of people Cheryl Latimer hosted refreshments for us inside, so people got to mingle with one another. And I would also like to thank the District of Sechelt, and we've been live streaming our jigging that takes place every Saturday up in Davis Bay Hall, as George was saying, from 11 to 1. It's open to the public. And so if you want to learn how to jig and learn a little bit about the culture, the mayor, she's been up there and had a few laughs. So exercising and having humor is a very important thing. So we do kind of a potluck thing, but Sechelt was one of our sponsors. So on our live stream, like on our, if you go on United Canadian Métis Nation, I don't know if everybody's on Facebook, but it's called Under Groups. And you just go on there and request to join, and you can watch all the live streaming. It's not all politics, it's recipes and all kinds of things about our culture. But with that said, I want to say how blessed I feel in my heart for all of you coming on board and supporting us once again on November the 16th for Louis Riel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions for our presenters? Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Our next presenters are Ross Powell and Diana Robertson, Sechelt Arts Festival. Oh, you're going to pass it out while they come up. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Congratulations once again on your new posts. I look forward to meeting every one of you in the near future. My name is Diana Robertson, and I'm co-producer of the Sechelt Arts Festival. I also have my co-producer Ross Powell here with me tonight. He's in the back, but there's only one seat, so we're going to try to make this brief. You have a very long agenda. We have submitted quite a long summary statement. It's about 60 pages. Fortunately, about 30 of it is pictures. So it's a pretty easy read when you really get to it. I hope you've had a chance to take a quick peek at it. Just to let you know a little bit about our background, the Sechelt Arts Festival has actually been in operation since 2003. This was our 15th anniversary. I have been with the festival for 5 years now. I started out as marketing director in 2012, and then in 2013 I began co-producing with Ross's wife, actually, Nancy Cottingham Powell. And Ross has also played a very strong part in the production of our performances over the last 5 years as well. So this is actually our fifth year, my fifth year, and our second year together as co-producers. So since its inception, the Sechelt Arts Festival has provided an accessible arts programming event to all residents of the District of Sechelt, and it's an annual showcase, as you know, of local talent to residents and visitors. The festival supports, encourages, and provides collaborative, multidisciplinary opportunities for off-coast and local professional artists and performers. We really pride ourselves on the fact that we do engage as many professional and community performers and artists in the community. The festival's mandate is, of course, to embrace all forms of art, including dance, music, theater, visual art, engagement art, and heritage. I'm just going to run through a couple of the drivers just to give you a bit of a background as to the benefits of our festival. It's a driver for advancing cultural tourism in our region. It's a driver to attract more visitors to the coast during the fall shoulder season. Socially and economically, it supports our local cultural community, such as visual artists, performers, actors, musicians, dancers, writers, directors, producers, technicians, facilitators, laborers, and painters who are all paid in some capacity for their work in the festival. Spin-off economic benefits have been created to to support local businesses, professional services, performance venue operators, motels, restaurants, printers, sign fabricators, caterers, and graphic artists. Just a short list of some of the people that we support and who contribute to the festival. The festival supports emerging coast talent. This is a big area of what we do in a variety of performance opportunities. In fact, the festival for the last 6 to 8 years has received funding from RBC for various workshop and emerging artists programs. We support arts mentoring between professional and community artists and performers. The festival also supports opportunities for local directors, artists, and producers to create new works to present to audiences in our community. And we also support collaboration with our local archival groups. This year, there were 5 archival groups that we collaborated with, and our Indigenous Sechelt Nation Arts, Cultural, and Heritage. Just to give you a quick summary of some of the results, because I know you like numbers, I didn't do a PowerPoint because I thought I'd just review these quickly. To honor our own talented coast artists and performers and the festival's 15th anniversary, we developed the theme of homegrown. Every year we've developed a specific theme for the last 5 years, and this theme has informed our marketing and our programming and created quite a cohesive program. This year, we had 15 days that we stretched the festival through, as opposed to 10 or 12, and we had 15 events. The festival engaged over 100 artists and performers, of which only 5 were from off-coast, so the balance of 95 were local performers and artists. We recruited 30 to 40 volunteers from the community and engaged over 4,000 community members and visitors. We collaborated with School District 46 to arrange for student classes to attend the art and heritage exhibits. There were 185 students that attended over 4 days to our workshops in the art and heritage exhibition. And we presented a performance for 220 students and teachers of our special Satio Circus Arts show in the Sechelt Nation Longhouse. The festival directly engaged 96 performers, 25 technical crew, 15 visual artists, 10 workshop facilitators, 4 coast archival groups, and 38 volunteers. Of these totals, 31 performers were local emerging artists, 8 artists and performers were Sechelt Nation members, and 4 were Japanese heritage performers. All performers, crew, artists, and facilitators received a negotiated fee or honorarium for their participation. 7 live performances were presented this year, integrating a variety of live musical genres, dance, theater arts, and circus arts. Approximately 1,200 people attended the performance events, and over 21 attended the Art and Heritage exhibition at the Seaside Center. Approximately 120 people participated in workshops this year, and almost 400 students were engaged in performance, art, and heritage events. 9 workshops were provided for the community, featuring a selection of homegrown theme events. And the workshops were held at the Sechelt Arts Center, Coast Academy of Dance, the Seaside Center, Wilson Creek U-Brew, and Davis Bay Hall. In order to present an indoor festival of this size, the following 6 venues were utilized: the Seaside Center, the Sunshine Coast Arts Center, Ravenscry Theater, Sechelt Nation Longhouse, the Sechelt Nation Community Hall, and the Sunshine Coast Botanical Garden. It was quite a feat to try to figure out the programming based on utilizing all of those venues. 4 district venues were also utilized for rehearsals and meetings. Some of the meeting time was contributed and some of it was paid for. Mission Point House, Davis Bay Hall, Coast Academy of Dance Studios, and the Rockwood Lodge. So you can see that the festival not only engages quite a few people in our community, but we also support their livelihoods as artists and as business people, as well as utilize facilities in the area that often get remuneration from the festival. In the actual report, there's quite a long dissertation on the event summary. I'll just go briefly into some of the key events. Of course, this year we had the first time ever something called our Homegrown Circus, and it was quite a delightful event. We had 2 sold-out shows and 1 show dedicated to a student and teacher audience. We would have done an extra show, but we couldn't get the venue for an additional day. So it was deemed to be extremely successful. There are some comments in the back of our report that speak to what people thought of the show, and in most cases, people were absolutely delighted, and also for the fact that we held it in the Sechelt Nation Longhouse, and that was created quite a special feeling for people too, being in the Longhouse. Coasters Covering Coasters was one of our performance events, and it was also something we'd never done before in this community, and it was also deemed to be quite a hit. Every year we do an Emerging Sounds type of program. This was the 7th year. We may change it up a little bit next year, but it's one of our highlight events and strictly features youth emerging talent from the high school age group, and some from elementary school. We also brought in quite a different feature this year called UT Area, which means for the At One with Nature. And it was a sort of an experimental show in a way, but it was a lovely show with 20 different performers, musicians, and dancers that had a wonderful message about the environment. The Earth Art exhibition, if you did catch it, was our featured art exhibition this year. Wonderful comments and accolades regarding that art exhibition. And the Homegrown Heroes, which was our heritage exhibit this year. Every year we've been focusing on heritage for 6 years now. 3 of those years was in the Temeswea Museum, and then for the last 2 years we've been utilizing the Seaside Center. And this was definitely received extremely well in light of the fact that we honored our Armistice Day, 100 years of Armistice Day. And some of that exhibit has actually gone to the Sunshine Coast Museum and Archives for another 10 days. We also, as I said, had 9 workshops that were all based on the homegrown theme, and they were quite delightful and well received. Revenue and expenses. Well, this year we did present a balanced budget, as we have for the previous years. And in fact, this year we exceeded our goals regarding funding opportunities and also in ticket sales. Our earned revenues were higher than originally budgeted, allowing the festival to present the circus arts performance as envisioned. We had quite a tall budget for that, and we didn't really want to have to do it on a shoestring. So we collaborated with one of our artists and went to Canada Council and managed to get a substantial grant to help offset the costs. So in that regard, we more than exceeded what we had planned for our production budgets in order to facilitate the festival. Ticket sales were 200% higher than in 2017, but that's because we almost doubled the number of performances. So from a earned revenue point of view, that was great to see, and we'd like to keep that up. Private donations were down slightly, but our corporate sponsorship was maintained this year as it had been last year, so we were very happy with that. In fact, we even exceeded the corporate sponsorship a little bit this year. So there is a detailed expense and revenue report if you'd like to take a look at it. But all in all, it was very successful across the board, including ticket revenue, which we're very happy to see. Regarding the future, since 2014, of course, we have engaged the Sechelt Nation artists and performers on a variety of events, including visual arts, heritage arts, and performance events. We are currently speaking with members of the Sechelt Nation regarding our 2018 collaborative Circus Arts Satio event in the Longhouse, and we've also invited Stephen Feschuk onto our committee. The Sechelt Arts Festival is actually overseen by a committee, and we look forward to having further discussions and talking about future collaborations. The festival's unique positioning as a leading edge and cultural festival is something that we have positioned the festival as for several years now, and we'd like to take a look at this as far as next year is concerned. It has informed our contemporary multidisciplinary approach to programming during the past, and our themed approaches, including The Story of Cedar, if you recall, in 2015, The Art of Water in 2016, Origins, which was last year in 2017, and this year Homegrown, have all resonated extremely well with the community and provided very rich story-based opportunities, workshops, and events that appeal to our sponsors, our funders, our attendees, our students, and our local artists. As well, we thank the District of Sechelt for being our primary sponsor for the festival, as they have been for the last 15 years. Advanced multi-year programming is more important than ever for artistic research and development, contracting artists, securing venues, and most important, our fundraising. Two of the festival's major government grants, our Canada Heritage Grant and BC Arts Council grants, are due by the end of January in 2019. It doesn't give us very long to prepare. This condenses our planning time for next year's festival in a very short window of a few weeks. And in order to apply for most grants, we need to determine the next year's direction, programming, and budgeting prior to this deadline. As of December the 30th, 2018, we are actually without a producer's contract for next year, but are moving forward with some preliminary program direction to prepare for the grant applications that will be due at the end of January. For the 2019 festival, we'd like to revisit what leading edge means in our arts community with a forward-thinking theme and direction. Ideas may include embracing the leaders of change in our community, in our arts community, as well as our Indigenous visual arts community. We may look at profiling multimedia artists who are thinking outside of the box in our community, as well as dancers, musicians, and stage performers who come together in a fusion of new work that is innovative and multidisciplinary. Those are just some thoughts that we have in mind so far. And just to wrap up, I received a couple of comments because part of my job is to facilitate all the reports, about 6 or 7 of them, to the different funders that help us every year, and I have to get those reports done in December. And as part of that, I've reached out to quite a few people to get comments, including some of the emerging artists that we've been working with. And I'm really delighted because this is part of the essence of what we do. Yes, we have lots of professional people that are part of our festival every year, but what I love is seeing the emerging artists grow and are able to be part of something that's a little bit different and are also mentored by some of our professional artists that come to visit and are part of this event. Here's a comment from a grade 10 student. He's actually been in 2 events last year and this year. And he's a budding actor, painter, writer, and he just directed his first play last week at the Heritage Theatre. So Gabe says, I find that the Sechelt Arts Festival continuously puts on very beautiful shows that are very meaningful and powerful. Siyaya last year and Utiera this year were both extremely rewarding to be involved in. They both addressed how important nature is and how important our connection to it is. And I think many, many people on the Sunshine Coast find that to be a breath of fresh air to address these issues while still being entertained. And that's from Gabe, who's in grade 10. Another one from 18-year-old dancer Bronte Hansen, who's really a terrific dancer in our community and hopes to have a career in dance. Both of these students, by the way, aside from the work that they do at school, are spending 20 to 28 hours a week in rehearsals and dance lessons or acting lessons or whatever the case may be. And Bronte says, I have been able to practice, the question was, what do you find, what kind of opportunities do you find the Sechelt Arts Festival provides for you to showcase your art? I have been able to practice solos and variations that challenge me as a dancer, and Utiera this year also gave me the chance to choreograph for myself, perform, and work with live musicians, which I found to be very rewarding and a great experience. So that's just a sampling of some of the comments that we received back from not just professionals, but also our students. That's great.
All right, thank you, Diana. Any questions from council? Councilor McLean?
Yeah, one trend I noticed throughout the report was challenges with venues.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what specifically those are and what we're missing in Sechelt in terms of performance venues.
Well, we're actually missing on a couple of fronts, but specifically with performance venues, we don't have a venue large enough to really bring in off-coast productions, for instance, because our venues only will accommodate maximum 275 tickets or people at one time. So this creates a lot of production nightmares for us, trying to figure out whether we need to do duplicate nights. Every time you put on another night, you're talking more rental fees, and quite often you just don't break even. And that's quite often why we don't do more than one or two shows in a series. So our venue, the one professional venue that we have, is very limited. This year when we put on the event in the Longhouse, we had to rent lighting and sound equipment from Vancouver. We had to bring that in. It was several thousands of dollars. And you wouldn't notice it when you walk in there. That's part of the effect. But we had lighting rigged on the special, not on the poles, but on the beams that hold the Longhouse together in order to produce that show in a professional fashion. So these are some of the challenges that we face. And not having a centralized venue that can accommodate all of these means that we have to go out and solicit space from all of these other places. And it's quite difficult during a 2-week period when there are movies going on and other things in the community.
All right, thank you.
So to follow up on that, what size of venue would you be looking for?
Minimum 400 seats, but these days a lot of venues are flexible venues. They're considered black box venues where you can actually have retractable seating. Anybody who's doing anything like this in Vancouver in the Lower Mainland is doing retractable seating type venue, so you can pull all the seats out and have a ballroom, and that's really the most efficient way of handling it.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I have one here, and this is actually for our staff.
Sure.
So the contract ends at the end of December. I think we're out at RFP for this, correct? Okay. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all you do.
You're welcome. Thanks.
So next are our proclamations, which I think our people in the front and a number of others are waiting for. So, Louis Riel Day, November 16, 2018. Whereas the Métis people and their descendants have significantly contributed to the exploration, growth, and development of Canada, and whereas the Métis people are recognized under Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 as one of Canada's Aboriginal peoples, and whereas Louis Riel was a humanitarian and an advocate for the Métis people, and one of the Métis people's foremost historic leaders, who strove for justice and the rights of the Métis people as Manitoba joined Confederation. And whereas November 16th is an important and symbolic date recognized by Métis people across British Columbia each year in commemoration of the death of Louis Riel on that day in 1885. And whereas the province of British Columbia honors Métis history and culture, Louis Riel's place in Canadian history, and the province's valued relationship with the Métis people of the province of British Columbia. Now, therefore, I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Sechelt Council, do hereby proclaim that November 16th, 2018 shall be known as Louis Riel Day in the District of Sechelt. Thank you very much. What do I have? Next proclamation, Restorative Justice Week, November 18th through 25th, 2018. Whereas in the face of crime or conflict, restorative justice offers a philosophy and approach that views these matters principally as harm done to people and relationships. And whereas restorative justice is a non-adversarial, non-retributive approach to justice that emphasizes healing in victims, accountability of offenders, and the involvement of citizens in creating healthier, safer communities. And whereas this year's theme for Restorative Justice Week is Inspiring Innovation, it is an opportunity to learn about restorative justice, educate and celebrate along with other communities across the country during the week. Now, therefore, I, Darnell de Seegers, on behalf of the District of Sechelt Council, do hereby proclaim that the week of November 18th through 25th, 2018, shall be known as Restorative Justice Week in the District of Sechelt. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to adoption of the minutes of previous council meetings. So minutes of October 17th.
Can the big chair go off so we can see you now?
Sure.
It's a giant chair.
You're just too short, Pam. You need a big chair in the back. Yeah, put the sinking one there. Okay. So, a motion to adopt the minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of October 17th. Councillor Toth, second. And is there anything in here, any errors or omissions in this one? No? All those in favor? Thank you. All right, the minutes of the 7 p.m. inaugural meeting of November 7th, 2018. A motion to adopt these. Thank you. Second. Thank you. Any errors or omissions in this one? All right, motion, all in favor? Thank you. And we have the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 14th. Motion to receive and adopt. Thank you. Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. And then we move to bylaws. Let me just get to the right page. So on page 86, first a motion to receive the report. Thank you. First, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And we'll turn it over to Tracy Corbett, Director of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The bylaw in front of you is the Smoking Control Bylaw number 570. The request is for second and third reading. It was in front of previous council on October 17th for first reading. The rationale for this bylaw replaces a very old bylaw that we have in place from 1991. There was a fair bit of work done in the district in 2016, including quite a comprehensive consultation process, public outreach at that time to develop the smoking bylaw. It did come back, it didn't move forward, it did come back to staff. There were concerns around a number of elements, one of them being signage. That section in the bylaw was quite extensive, and the other was Town of Gibson's was just launching theirs, and there was a desire to try and match them in terms of their requirements. The changes reflect some of the changes in provincial legislation. It used to be they had a setback of 3 meters. They changed it a couple of years ago to a 6 meter change in a no smoking area. One of the things this bylaw does do, it addresses a broad definition of smoking, so it includes vaping, it includes cannabis. So kind of anything you can smoke or vape, it's covered. It recognizes the health concerns related to both smoking and secondhand smoke, also concerns around fire safety, smoking on our trails. We have a lot of forested area. So the smoke-free buffer area, as mentioned, the ministry already regulates quite a bit. That's done by the province. They impose a 6-meter smoke-free buffer around all doors, air intakes, the windows of public and private workplaces. And they have quite an extensive definition of workplace. It also includes a lot of vehicles. So in this bylaw, we're proposing a 7.5 meter, that's 25 feet for those who don't convert, to align with Gibson's. So the smoking restrictions, they cover the common areas. It covers customer service areas, and this is mostly related to any area where food and beverage are consumed. The outdoor public events, that's much more applicable to the district. It covers anything that we kind of allow, either we're doing it or we are authorizing someone through permit to do an event, is covered there, in place of public assembly. What it doesn't cover, just for clarity, is sidewalks and roads. So while it might be under our jurisdiction, the smoking bylaw does not apply to that. The 7.5 kicks in on most of the transit stops, which are identified, but it doesn't cover all the infrastructure. So in terms of public spaces, it is those areas owned and controlled by the district. So designated trails, parks, and beaches. So one area we do not control that wouldn't be covered under this is anything below the high water mark. So on our beaches, and I'll go through, that's why I have it started, I'll go through a little bit more on that of where it actually does apply, but it's not the entire beach area. Decks and seating areas, so around particularly Hackett and Kinnickinnick, playing fields, sport fields, skating rinks, bike and skate parks. So with the beaches, the ones that are under designated control, Davis Bay is the one area where we actually control most of the beach and the boardwalk area. So that would be an area restricted. In Trail Bay, it's the boulevard area, the pathway that is shown, and the rock outcrops are actually designated, but the beach itself is not. There's an area on the Silverstone walkway. Most of this will show up to in any of our mapping on the beach access. Those areas are delineated. There's an area around the Gale Esplanade off Harbor Road, the Ani Waterfront Trail, so just off Sechelle Inlet Road, and the waterfront trail that is just north of that between Allen and Burnett is what falls under designated beach area. That was showing some of the areas that are actually covered, and it does not come out well. I just couldn't get a good photo of the beach areas, but it is in our mapping. So the recommendation is that the smoking control bylaw number 570, 2018 be given second and third reading. Now I know there were some issues and some possible amendments that need to be made. I'll turn that over to Councillor to describe, but the alternative motion could be to refer it back to staff to make those revisions and amendments, and we would bring the bylaw back. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Council, questions? Councillor Toth.
You can hear me okay back there? I had two questions, one of which is common area. It only shows up in the definitions. It doesn't show up anywhere in the bylaw itself. I don't know if we want to add it under 3.1, but I leave that open to discussion.
Okay, staff?
Through the chair, an option for that is to amend section 3.1 to add common areas to the definition and reorder accordingly. So we could add the common area, probably under common service area, added in there because it is related to both the common service area and sometimes in our event areas, so it would fall in, then I just reorder it.
So you'd put it in as B and move the others down? Or put it in as A and move all the others down?
I could put it, yeah, I could just reorder it so it's adjacent to the public area. So maybe making it as 3.1B and then reorder the others accordingly.
Okay, and another question?
And then I had one more comment about section 4.1, which is relating to signage. Right now it reads, issuance of a permit is responsible for displaying a sign on any advertisement or poster promoting an event or activity, stating this is a smoke-free event, no smoking, please. I think it's a little too onerous and all-encompassing. You're talking about, based on this wordage, you're talking about newspaper ads, radio plugs, banners that we have on the banner poles. There's an event up there right now that's the Festival of Lights, December 1st. Based on this section, this is a smoke-free event, no smoking, please, actually exceeds the verbiage promoting the event itself. So I guess I would suggest that maybe we make it so that it's on any advertisement or poster at the event.
Okay, through to staff.
Through the chair, the council is quite correct in the way it is worded. It could be quite onerous if it's for every advertisement. Thought process was similar to what happens at the farmers market. It's on the sandwich board at the entrance. So I think 4.1 could be amended following the section where it says responsible for displaying a sign, and then the wording on any advertisement or poster promoting the event or activity, changing that to responsible for displaying a sign at each event or activity, stating, and then it's really up to the event promoter just to make sure it's there. How they do it would be up to them. Usually the easiest to do is through the sandwich board or at the entranceway to have the signage there.
It would read, any person who holds a permit for any outdoor public event or activity that the district has authorized by the issuance of a permit is responsible for displaying a sign at each event or activity,
correct,
stating this is a smoke-free event, no smoking, please. Okay, thank you.
Correct. It would strike out on any advertisement or poster promoting.
Okay, does that address your concern?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
All right. Any other questions from other councillors? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I was hoping if staff could clarify, does this bylaw apply to schools? A school should probably be within outdoor public space. I also looked it up on the School District 46. They currently don't allow smoking on any school property, but I think it should be backed up in this bylaw as well.
Staff?
Through the chair, the province legislation already covers that off. We wouldn't have, from a bylaw enforcement perspective, would be challenging to be on their property, but they regulate it, and it's so through the province they do that, and the school itself regulates it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Rowe.
As far as beachfront goes, where do we stand with Davis Bay Pier as far as this? Is that included, or?
Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, it would be. The only part that all of Davis Bay waterfront there is actually included, because there isn't really a lot of low area beyond the high water mark there, so it really covers off that whole area, including the wharf. Where it differs in Trail Bay is below that high water mark on the beach itself, so not our pier, that's covered, but below the high water mark, that would be fair game.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You had mentioned that this is to align with Gibson's. Is it already a bylaw with them at 7.5 meters?
Through the chair, correct. It did. Ours is very, very similar. It's certainly the smoke-free area we aligned.
Okay.
Right, any other questions? This side of the table. All right. So we have a couple of options here now. We could either move this forward to second or third reading, incorporating the amendments that have been brought forward, or we could refer it back to staff and have them do the revisions and bring that back to us. What is the wish of council?
I'm good to move it forward with the amendments.
Okay. So I'd like a motion then for recommendation number 2 that the smoking control bylaw be given second and third reading.
So
Thank
moved.
you. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. So let's go to the bylaw. So on page 91, bylaw number 570/2018, a bylaw to regulate smoking within the district of Sechelt, and we're looking to make 2 amendments. We're looking to add common areas to 3.1 and renumbering the section in there, and we are looking to change 4.1 to remove the wording on any advertisement or poster promoting the, where it will read displaying a sign at each event or activity. And I'd like someone to move second reading. Thank you, thank you. All those in favor? And third reading. Look over on this way. Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. So now we have the bylaw notice enforcement implementation. This is item 8.2A. So what this does is puts into our bylaw notice enforcement the actual fines for contravention of the bylaw that we're looking to move forward for smoking. So first I'd like to have a motion to receive the report. Thank you. First, second, all in favor? Thank you. And would you like to speak to this briefly? Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. As mentioned, bylaw 515-4 is simply aligned with the smoking control bylaw, so the readings should be the same. It authorizes bylaw enforcement and provides enforcement options, and it sets the fee schedule for any fines related to it. With relationship to the smoking control bylaw, our efforts related to enforcement are primarily on education and information. We've had very little issues around smoking complaints in terms of bylaw issues. But we like to have it in place in case we have repeat problems or there's any safety concerns. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from council? Yes, Councillor Toth.
I guess we need to add common area to this as well, right? Because the ordering is based off of the bylaw.
Yes, correct. Good call. So it'll be on page 98 in the table, right? Schedule A. Okay, with that amendment, is someone willing to move forward with second reading? Thank you. First and second, all those in favor, as amended. And third reading? Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you very much. So we'll move to item 8.3. This is regarding solid waste collection and disposal bylaw, and this is up for adoption. So first, a motion to receive the report. First and second, all in favor? Thank you. And we'll turn to Doug Stewart to give an overview of this.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, this bylaw received 3 readings on October 17th. Specifically, this bylaw is to provide a waiver for properties in the assessed below $184,000. Basically, to give you some background, earlier this year, Council changed the collection bylaw to start collecting garbage from mobile home parks. At the time, to provide for that, the unintended consequence of doing that, unfortunately, was that some people in those home parks, I believe, thought that they would be able to use unused homeowner grant. Some of them, because of their assessed value, are not able to take advantage of their entire homeowner grant available to them. And you can't use homeowner grants on garbage fees and sewer levies, that type of thing. So unfortunately, basically, when you don't use the grant, it's forfeited for that year. So what this does is allow these same people, if they have an unused homeowner grant portion available to them and they're eligible for the additional grant. So it's only those people who are seniors, veterans on low income, or people on disability. If they have unused homeowner grant, they can apply that unused portion against the garbage collection. Basically, we waive that portion of the garbage fee up to the maximum $216. So essentially what this is doing is providing a waiver. It starts at $146,000. When your assessment passes $186,000, you would actually be no longer eligible for the waiver because you would have no unused homeowner grant beyond that point. So we're now looking for adoption of this bylaw.
Okay, any questions by council? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, section 2B, there's a mention of payable to a maximum of $216. I understand that's the amount that we charge under section 18, which is in the original bylaw. I'm just wondering, for good governance, should it not be mentioned that it's the maximum amount? So if we ever have to change the amount that we charge for garbage, we'd essentially have to change it in two places because it's mentioned in two places now.
So you're looking at section 2B?
Yep. Here. So I'm just taking issue with the 216. Rather than referencing a concrete number, just reference the charge for garbage like you do in 2C. Fee set out in section 18 as applicable. This is just a good governance point. So that, yeah.
There certainly is an option, or we could just bring both bylaws forward anytime we change the rate. So it's certainly up to council to decide if you'd rather just reference the fees and charges bylaw. Well, actually, when I think about it, I'm going off, change it. It's the same bylaw where the charge is. All we're doing is modifying this section.
Yep.
So at some point, if the charge was to increase to, say, $220, we would just have to change two sections of the same bylaw anyway.
Yep.
So it wouldn't really matter to.
Okay.
Okay, anything else from council? Thank you. So would somebody like to move adoption of this solid waste collection and disposal bylaw, amendment number 548-3? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Moving to item 8.4A. This is the Planning Development Procedures Bylaw number 566, 2018. First, a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. And we'll turn to our Director of Planning and Development Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The bylaw in front of you is the Planning and Development Procedures Bylaw for adoption. This is bylaw 566, 2018. So the rationale for this bylaw, it's actually a legislative requirement. Anyone who has a zoning bylaw or an OCP must have a bylaw in place regarding the procedures for it. We do have one in place in the District of Sechelt. It does require some updating and some clarification on it. It was kind of a little less than linear. And with this, it also wanted to respond to some earlier council resolutions around clarifying what needs to happen with public hearings and the delegation authority. It also clarifies the authorities of council and adds some criteria around how we deal with certain applications. When it came before council for second and third, it was amended. It extended the notification area for amendments and development variance permits and temporary use permits from the existing area of 50 meters. So what we do there is when we have one of these going forward, prior to any public hearing, or in the case of variance permit or TUP, prior to it being adopted by council, we do a written notification that's delivered to homes within that buffer area. So that has been extended from 50 meters to 100. It changes the timing of notifications. So what was happening previously is that we would seek permission to do the notification from council, which meant that we were getting a lot of information in front of council before any of the neighbors kind of knew something was up. So this way we get some information to them so they're well aware of when the council meeting is occurring. There may be some times with development variance permit where the timeline might be quite tight that we can't do that, but our idea is to not necessarily bring it forward asking permission to notify. We'll notify, and then that allows people to address council if they need to. We do have requirements for posting of notice signs. Those are limited to amendments, so OCP and zoning, where they actually have to post on the site. This is the permission to proceed report. This is a new step in the process. It's quite limited to certain applications, and this is really about applications where someone is coming in with quite a significant amendment to the OCP, or a major departure in policy or zoning where it wasn't contemplated in the OCP. You're being asked to look at something quite different. The rationale for this is to bring it forward to council for consideration before applicants spend a lot of money on the reports and go through a public hearing process and all the costs that involves when something just wouldn't be contemplated at all. It just doesn't fit with what your vision is. So it provides an opportunity to really weigh in on a go, no go. If it is something that could be contemplated or needs additional information, it gives you an opportunity early to actually advise staff and the applicant about what kind of information you'd want to see before you had a comfort level making a decision on the application. So it gives you some ability to advise on us if we need to extend our consultation prior to a hearing, or additional reports or issues that you think would need to be resolved before it could be contemplated. So it's not for every application. It really would be those where we do see something being quite different, so significant increases in density or a use in an area that just wasn't contemplated. So the bylaw itself identifies, goes through quite a bit of detail on application procedures. So it identifies the steps and the requirements. A major issue that we've been trying to be a little clearer with is the notion of complete application. Sometimes we've taken in applications that have not been complete. In the applicant's mind, they're good to go, and there's additional information needing, and the clock is ticking. So we're getting clearer about what is needed before we actually accept the application and cash the check. So there's a number of steps that need to go in there. We've put a lot more information around what that complete application looks like. We've also applied that criteria to our building permits as well. It includes evaluation criteria. This is both for the applicant's information, but also for council when you're deliberating on an item of what kind of things you need to look at. The area I wanted to really emphasize with that is that when we're looking at an OCP amendment or a zoning amendment, it's not enough that it just meets the OCP designation. There's a lot of policy in the OCP, and for it to be an acceptable application, it really needs to consider, is it meeting a lot of that other criteria? Is it a good thing for the district itself? We have a requirement now in writing that post-referral reporting to the applicant. So once we've gone out to 30-day referral to agencies, usually utility companies, the regional district, sometimes the RCMP, that once we gather all that, we do a written report to the applicant as to identify what kind of issues have been raised and what kind of additional reports may be required at that point. It includes the servicing review requirements, so we get input from engineering early in the process. It identifies the consultation requirements, so sometimes in the case of amendments, we advise the applicant that they should do a public information meeting. That's their meeting, it's not ours, for them to just get some input from the community before it comes to us for a hearing. It outlines the council authorities and it sets reapplication intervals. So if someone has applied for something, you've denied it, there's a required interval before it can come back. And give you a sense of, with evaluation criteria on amendments, so some things that we would look at is growth management. Is it in the right area? Is it at the right time? Is it encouraging growth in an area that just wasn't contemplated, or it's requiring an extension of services that are going well beyond our capacity? We look at development constraints, really the suitability of the site. This becomes critical. A lot of steep slope, which you'll see a lot of. Infrastructure and servicing feasibility, off-site impact, so what's the impact on adjacent uses or on residents, and compatibility with adjacent uses are the main ones. Delegated authority. So in looking at delegated authority, I will emphasize I have no personal interest in this whatsoever. It's really about striking the balance of what really requires council consideration and community input, and what's more technical that we can just move it through because it's time and money for the applicant. So it defines minor development permit, and it delegates authority regarding renewals of those and the approval. It used to be based on a construction value, which got a little challenging and over the years meant very little. So now there's a size area related to what constitutes a minor. And then there are certain development permits that we do that are quite technical. So providing they meet the guidelines under those, it's mainly DPA areas 3, 4, and 5. So that's shoreline, it's rocky beachfront, and it's steep slope that allows it to be an administrative approval. There is legislated authority here. This is not Sechelt. There is legislated authority even with delegated authority. If any applicant wants council to reconsider the decision of the director, they have that right. So there is a process that's written into the Local Government Act to come before you and have it reconsidered. The other side of that, too, is that any authority I am delegated, I can reserve the right to bring it forward to you if I feel that either it's setting something in motion I really think is in the community interest. The bylaw allows me to bring that forward, and I would bring that forward. There is an application guide that we've done. It's still in draft. We're going to go through with the help of the communications manager. We'll make it a little easier and put some flow charts in there. So we'll have another run at that. And we're going to update the sections on both the ALR and then the cannabis requirements after our December 6th. Community input on that. We'll get a little more detail of how we're going to manage that. But what the intention of it is to give our applicants a lot more information. We include the complete application checklist in that. We have more detailed evaluation criteria. We kind of walk them through the could you and the should you, and that's also to the benefit of whether it's APC or whether it's council. Sometimes something is technically feasible or it fits under a zoning, but it doesn't fit a lot of good planning principles and other policies. So there's always that weighing in of what council can look at is technically, can it fit? Should it? And that gets a little more nuanced. So it adds in subdivision and provincial approvals in there. It is non-statutory, so it allows updating and reformatting without having to amend as we would with a bylaw. So the recommendations on this are that council adopt the Planning and Development Procedures Bylaw number 566/2018. And there's a number of policies, I won't read them all out, but there's a number of policies that have been in place, some of them quite dated. Some of them are actually quite irrelevant because the legislation covers it off. So it's suggesting with the adoption of this bylaw, we can rescind those policies. Alternative motion, if there are any concerns with it, that either be deferred or referred back to staff to make any changes, or that it be denied. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Very much. Any questions of the director from council? Councillor McLean.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to thank staff for this. It is, I think, very helpful for an incoming councillor to understand the development process. Particularly the application guide is very helpful, at least it was for myself, and I think it will be very helpful for anyone looking to work in the district of Sechelt. So thank you for that, and thank you for clearing up all these quite very small bylaws that dealt with very specific issues and have a more comprehensive bylaw. So that is pretty great. This is more a question for my own understanding, and it does relate to the bylaw. Is there a case when a single-family residential home could need a minor development permit or a whole development permit, because it's not mentioned in the bylaw?
Staff? Thank you.
Through the chair, the single detached is mentioned in the minor, and where development permits sometimes kick in is if it's within a development permit area, usually sometimes it'll kick into the hazard and environmental, so if it's on foreshore, shoreline will impose setbacks related to that particular development permit. Those tend to be quite minor. Or if it's on steep slope, that's far more common. And so we do that through a technical development permit, and it gets picked up again at the building permit stage, where if there is a geotechnical report and recommendations around how it should be built, that follows through into building permit stage. But a lot of them, if it's not within a development permit area, would not require one.
Okay, thanks. That helps clarify it for myself.
Any other questions? Comment?
I echo Councillor McLean's thoughts and thanks on this. It's very helpful. The application guide itself, is that a replacement document? Did we have one prior? Or is this brand new?
Through the chair, no, that's brand new.
Okay, and
yeah, we had bits and pieces of it. Like
yeah.
it was we had guides for very specific elements of it, but we didn't have. So it was more like fact sheets, and so this way we put everything together.
Okay, and have we had any developers themselves give us feedback on it?
I don't think it's been used yet. Correct?
Through the chair, we haven't used it. I did send it out to a few people for review, but didn't do a kind of formal through it. What I would suggest, because it's not really changing too much from legislation and what we had in place. But I think it would be the kind of thing of, is it clarifying or is it not, or are there additional things? I think what we'd probably do is really use it and give it out at our pre-application meetings and get some feedback through that as people use it. I find sometimes with something that's this detailed, sometimes just in reading it, it can look fine, and then when you're starting to apply it to something more specifically, I think, oh, we missed something or something's not clear. So I would anticipate doing some changes, and if it does trigger anything to the bylaw, it would come back to you as to something that we need to alter.
So just to be clear, the application guide itself, if you need to make changes to it, you're able to do that independently without messing with the bylaw.
The chair, we can, as long as it doesn't conflict with the bylaw. So as long as it's in conformity with that, where I would see us probably altering it is one, adding in the flow charts. An area that came up, someone was suggesting that we do a little bit more on when we're asking for some technical reports, just put a little more information in there about why we ask for that and how it relates to the development. So we might have a little more interpretation information in there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right. So what's council's wish? We have a motion that we could make where we would adopt this. Move that. Second. Okay. All those in favor? Okay. We'll get to the actual bylaw process. Should we adopt the bylaw first before we rescind these others, or does it matter? Should? Okay. So let's move to the bylaw. That's on page 168. So I'd look for a motion to adopt Planning and Development Procedures Bylaw number 566, 2018, a bylaw to establish procedures for the processing of land development applications. Moved by Councillor, forgotten your last name, Scott, yes? Seconded by Councillor Rowe. All those in favor? Thank you. So then let's move back to page 105. I'd like a motion to rescind the motion or the policies all as listed. Councillor McLean, Councillor Kuster, all those in favor? Thank you. I'll move on to 8.5 in our agenda. So this is 8.5, and this is, I'll do a motion to receive the report on page 188 regarding the adoption of the housing agreement bylaw for high tide. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. And over to staff.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. In front of you is a housing agreement bylaw, number 571, 2018, request for adoption. This applies to the BC Supportive Housing project on High Tide Avenue. That is the location. And it is a 3-story, 40-unit project. As a requirement under the legislation, when there's usually an exchange of whether it's density, it's a rezoning, where we're securing a commitment to affordable housing or special needs housing, it's done through a housing agreement bylaw. It needs to be done as a bylaw. That's something that's actually written through the Local Government Act. The bylaw itself can include terms and conditions. Usually it defines the affordability. It may define the number of units. A number of conditions we often have is that it can't be stratified. It needs to stay as affordable rental. In some cases, it may be client-specific. If it was a seniors-only area, that would show up in the housing agreement. What you can't do through a housing agreement is vary the use or the density. So the terms and conditions in this particular bylaw is the use is limited. It's limited to affordable rental of 40 units. The rents are set at the shelter rate. That's approximately $375, and maximum rent of 30% of income. There's restriction on no short-term rentals and no rental agreement under 30 days. There's no subdivision or applications to stratify permitted. There's a requirement in this housing agreement that on the ground floor of this development, that there's a requirement for 4 wheelchair accessible units, and there's 4 adaptable units. So the recommendation on this, and I will say with the housing agreement itself, there has been a lot of discussion back and forth with BC Housing. This reflects their requirements as well, and we have had legal review on it. So the recommendation is that the housing agreement bylaw number 571, 2018 for that property be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by council? Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Is there any requirement within the housing agreement for it to be Sunshine Coast residents or prioritized for Sunshine Coast? Or is somebody able to apply from Fort St. John to be able to come down to the Sunshine Coast? Thank you.
Staff?
Through the chair, we don't actually write that into the, it hasn't been written into the bylaw of how we would define residency. But in terms of BC Housing, in terms of how they determine who is, it's usually those transitioning from our shelter. And they're usually known clients on this kind of development. Sometimes if we're securing a housing agreement for a condo development, sometimes that's a little bit different of if we want to define that. That actually comes into some of our criteria around how we do it rather than the bylaw. But in this case, because it's the intake is controlled through BC Housing, it tends to not only be Sunshine Coast, it tends to be very local.
Any other questions? Councillor Scott.
It states in there that the tenants can't create vehicle parking demands. Does that mean that they can't have a vehicle, or is it force people into on-street parking?
Through the chair, in the original application, they were only proposing 5 parking stalls, primarily for staff, because it's quite a low income here and most do not have vehicles. So it essentially puts notice on there that it can't kind of transition into something else that would have a high parking lot. So it's just kind of a notice on title around that. We did work with the applicant around if there were those that may have a vehicle. It's unlikely, but we made arrangements for how we could manage that for some additional off-site parking that was identified in the site plan. So we do have a plan B on that.
Yeah, this was something that came up when we actually looked at the plan, and they identified that the people who'll be living here don't have enough income to be able to afford gas or insurance, etc., and usually do not have a vehicle. Okay. Any other questions? So we have a recommendation in front of us, recommendation number 2. How would you like to proceed?
We'll move it.
Move recommendation number 2. Second. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. So let's go to the bylaw. So the bylaw is on page 191. So it is Housing Agreement Bylaw 571, 2018, BC Housing, High Tide Avenue, a bylaw to authorize the District of Sechelt to enter into a housing agreement with the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation pursuant to Section 483 of the Local Government Act. And I'd look for a motion to adopt this. Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you very much. So we have no new business. So we'll move on to 10.1 on page 204, not 2004. Oh my goodness, 204. Motion to receive the report, please. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. And we'll turn to Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is really for information only for council to let you know that we applied for a $4,000 grant to the Celebrate Canada grant. It's to again, for next year's Canada Day. It's a $4,000 grant, as I say. There's no district contribution required, so it's 100% funding from the federal government. There actually is no requirement for council to approve the grant application, but typically we would have brought this forward to you ahead of time just to let you know we were doing it. But because of the date, it was actually application had to get into today. There was no opportunity to do that, so we're bringing it forward to you now, letting you know that we have applied. But should council not wish to receive the federal funds or not wish to celebrate Canada Day, we could withdraw the grant application.
Very funny. Okay. Any questions of council? All right. Item 10.2. This is for Housing Central BC's Affordable Housing Conference. And first, let's move receipt. First and second, all in favor? Thank you. And again, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this one does need some ratification from council, but it is a retroactive application. There was a BC Affordable Housing Conference in Vancouver from November 18th to November 20th this year. Councillor McLean volunteered to go attend the conference on behalf of council, but primarily we'd normally get this endorsed from council ahead of time. So we're really just looking for ratification for Councillor McLean having gone to that conference.
And just for the public's information, one of the reasons why Councillor McLean went is there was a special rate for under 30s. So we got a very special rate for him to go. So I'd look for someone to move recommendation number 2. Councillor Kuster, Councillor Scott, all those in favor? Thank you. And 10.3, move receipt of the report. This is on banks or financial signing authority. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the November 7th inaugural meeting, Council approved a signing authority resolution. Unfortunately, we neglected to include myself as Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Administrative Officer in that resolution, and because that resolution essentially replaced any prior resolution, the signing authorities were now a challenge for us. So particularly with the way it's also set up, because the way it's set up with the bank is that it's any 3 councillors and any one of myself or the CAO. So it's not a case where 2 councillors can sign even with the resolution you had. So it's put us in a bit of limbo at this point. So we're bringing forward a new resolution. One thing you may have noticed in here is we specifically didn't name the Chief Administrative Officer or the Chief Financial Officer or Director of Corporate and Financial Services, essentially because this way should Mr. Yates win the lottery and you need to replace him quickly, whoever you replace in that position would automatically be given sign authority.
All right. Any questions by council? Councillor Toth.
I just want to say in here it's referenced that you are automatically assigning authority based on the bylaw and the way things are structured, correct?
That is correct. Under my job description of the officer's bylaw, I'm deemed to have signing authority automatically as soon as you appoint me.
Okay. Yes. Sorry, Andrew. Going forward, is there something that should be amended in the officer's bylaw so that this doesn't accidentally happen ever again?
Staff? Is that
well,
something
that's certainly an
option
we consider looking at
okay.
for the next
okay.
officer bylaw.
Any other comments? Would somebody like to make recommendation number 2? Councillor Toth, Councillor Scott, all those in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to item 10.4. This is for a development permit for Lot 7, Trail Bay Estates Subdivision, Clayton Family Lands Limited. Motion to receive the report. First and second, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you. Staff?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. This is a development permit for a steep slope application. The location is, as mentioned, just off below Cowrie or below Barnacle. It's part of the Clayton lands. It is lot 7, and it's 7 lots subdivision. So a requirement from a procedural point of view, before we approve a subdivision, if it's within a development permit area for requiring a hazard development permit or environmental, that's required to be done prior to us approving the subdivision. So they've got preliminary subdivision layout, and that's what it looks like. And then the requirement here would be to assess the steep slopes. We require a geotechnical report, which is attached to this report, to identify any issues. It affects the building footprint area. There were no geotechnical issues identified. It just means as we move into the building permit stage, that geotechnical report guides where the developable area is, and it guides the individual geotechnical analysis done at each lot. So under DPA number 5, so the intent of that, it identifies areas across the district where the intent is to minimize the impact of development on hillsides and steep slopes, and try to retain as much of the natural feature on the sloped lands. This is always a challenge in Sechelt, because sometimes this is not really possible. But it intends to try and mitigate as much of the land alteration as possible, so avoiding really aggressive cuts and extremely large retaining walls on it. So we have regulations and guidelines through this particular development permit area to guide us on that. This application is in conformity based on that geotechnical report, so we are asking that it be approved subject to that attachment that forms part of the permit, and that the landscape bond in amount of $2,353.50 be held to ensure that the proposed landscaping is installed and maintained for a 2-year period. This is a very conventional condition in most of our development permits. So with that, I would look for a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by council? Councillor Todd.
This is mostly just for my own information. Do we know if it's their intention to sell just the bare lots, or are they intending to build out and sell dwellings?
In most cases with this particular developer, they usually sell it with the home. The applicant is in the audience if they want to clarify, but or he left. But usually with Clayton's, they usually do their own homes and sell it complete package.
Any other questions? I have one on page 213. It says staff requested the applicant to provide locations of proposed cut and fill, blasting, and retaining wall construction activities required for the subdivision. Have we received that information, or is that something that'll come?
Through the chair, we've received the information through the geotechnical report on where they're going to cut. With the blasting permits, those don't come before council. It is something that that I authorize with that. So we do. It's another process that identifies when they blast, where they blast, and certain conditions around that. So we certainly have that before they move forward on anything.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions? Would someone like to make recommendation number 2? Councillor McLean? Councillor Rowe? Anything further before we vote on this? All those in favor? Thank you very much. I'll move to 10.5. Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. So I'd like a motion to receive this report. This is just for information at this point. Thank you. Receipt. All those in favor? Thank you. And we'll turn it over to Ms. Corbett.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. This is in front of you right now for a couple of reasons, rather than asking for an adoption. We will be addressing this at the December 6th open house that we're proposing. I'd also say, too, there's a community group that's expressed some interest in helping to move forward on a number of the initiatives. So the Tomorrow Action Group for Sechelt that was formed after the screening of the movie Tomorrow with Dana, has done a lot of work of pulling people together to look at a number of those things, and I've had one meeting with them. So I thought it would be instructive that council actually get this before we move too far down the road with the community. So I'll just go through kind of for information and kind of give you some context as to why we got where we got. So in terms of an integrated community sustainability plan, I think it was mentioned actually in the strategic session today, they used to be a requirement if we needed to access the provincial gas tax. They made it a requirement that you had to have an ICSP. The district did one in 2011. There was a decision in 2017 to redo it or to update it. Dillon Consultants were hired to do that work. So what the plan is in this, it tends to be a fairly high-level plan. It's strategic. It's got a much longer range. But the key thing around any sustainability plan, it really is about a decision-making process of really looking at beyond kind of bottom line elements to really look at a broader range of issues of environmental and social and economic before moving forward on something. So the purpose of it, as identified in the plan, it was to identify both community and environmental values, so that includes social and cultural and economic as well. It's intended to provide guidance for any future OCP or master plan updates. And a key part of it, I think, it sets the stage for the community-based initiatives. It's very challenging for any community group to take on a planning process. So it's one thing that the district can really contribute a lot to is really doing that work, and then it allows a community group to kind of run with it. So this was done with this particular plan. There were 6 steps. We're now on number 5, looking at the revised goals and action plan. And then following the December 6th, the open house, if there's any revisions that need to be made, we'll make another iteration, and that's when we'll bring it back to you for consideration of adoption. We have an advisory committee. They provided a lot of feedback on the process, on the vision, input into the priorities, the planning options. They provided a lot of feedback on the draft plan, which is why it was rewritten internally, and they advised on additional steps in the consultation before adoption. So that's where we decided on the ideas fair. So there was, with the consultants, they did do a draft plan. It was looked at by both planning committee, the previous planning committee, and the advisory, ICSP advisory committee. So some of the issues were identified where it's concerns with the structure of the document more so than the content. It just wasn't particularly focused to have very broad base. They thought it would be very difficult to implement. There was a lot of repetitiveness in it. It tended to use the same language for the principles, the goals, the focus area, so it was a little bit challenging to kind of identify what we were doing. It used a fairly dated vision statement from 2007. So one of the changes to be looked at, and this is something to be considered both by council and in the public process, is a changed vision statement. It took some of the elements out of the other one. It was pages long. So it kind of condensed it as to what the vision should be. And then in you can see in the structure of the report, in addition to the vision that vision statement, it then goes into certain elements around commitments. So what the district is committed to under making for accessible communities, inclusive, affordable, prosperous, and resilient. It added sustainability principles that were actually principles. And yeah, so there's 6 of them, and dealt with it. It really aligns with kind of what an ICSP is. Integration, the long-term thinking, equity, shared responsibility, stewardship, and continuous improvements. And I think the continuous improvements is a real critical principle whenever you're doing any kind of long-range plan, is that it's very difficult to get it right, but far more improvement to make a commitment to continually improve as we get more information. The other was changing. They had a number of focus areas. There were 13, so it was a little unfocused. So we changed that to seven goals. I'm sounding really snarky, aren't I? 7 goals. So those were grouped under social sustainability and community well-being, economic sustainability, environmental, arts and culture, planning for climate change. We made that into a distinct one because it's going to be a key challenge for us. Sustainable growth and development, and leadership in sustainability. And so under each of those, it clarified, first of all, it added a rationale statement, why that's important, why we need to be concerned about this. It added in a section around the roles, so what the district can do, what we have authorities to do, and identified some areas that, we may have only a tangential role. And in the goals and action, it reworked the information that was from the draft report, so it reduced some of those duplications to get into a little more concise view of what those actions might be. And luckily, they match a lot of the things that were discussed today. In the district roles, so in some of them it is a direct service provider, but in a lot of cases, particularly around, you see with the housing provision and a number of the climate change, it's also an advocate to senior government, a promoter. So when we're looking at economic prosperity, I think councils play a key role in really promoting Sechelt as a place to invest. Facilitating, so facilitating community groups and other activities. A regulator, planner, we develop plans and policies. Service provider, funder, and decision maker. In social sustainability, so we have a large section in the plan devoted to affordable housing, so the notion of moving forward on a comprehensive housing strategy. Policy direction around increasing supply and also retaining existing stock. That's usually the most cost-effective way of maintaining affordable housing, is making sure that you actually retain the existing stock that you have and it not fall into either stratifying for condo but keeping affordable rental. There's a number of areas around the intergenerational community. Council did do some work on this around the continuum of care, and also kind of an all ages view of this. It also covers how we deal with access and making for more independent communities through a lot of travel choices, locating housing in walkable areas. Really makes a difference in terms of how long people can stay in their own homes and not need care. Access to local food was mentioned a lot by the advisory committee and community. In economic sustainability, the notion of increasing prosperity, certainly protecting the non-residential land supply, identifying barriers to local economic development. Investing in the downtown has always been a key policy, and developing strategic infrastructure servicing strategy. So our non-residential industrial areas can prosper, and that would be a key area around where we're servicing, whether it's water, sewer, or drainage. but it will be very important, particularly for fiscal sustainability, of improving the non-residential assessment base. Also in diversifying the economy, as mentioned around the Arts Festival and how important that is to this community from an economic point of view. Supporting a range of home-based businesses, the community forest. So there were a number of elements in there around contributing to the economy. In this section under environmental sustainability, there are a number of things we already have in place, but it's just needing to kind of improve our environmental policies. Our tree protection bylaw is an area you'll see relatively soon of needing to update it, refine it, and make it a little stronger. And as mentioned today, the refining of the development permit area guidelines. Council has the ability to approve or deny an application under a development permit based on those guidelines. So they can be quite powerful. So that's why I think we need to work on refining those so it's very clear on what's required. If it's too vague, it just kind of dilutes the ability, and it's very challenging from a decision-making point of view. Environmental sustainability, key ones around responsible growth management. So making sure that we're managing our growth and tying that to our servicing strategies more, not sprawling, not extending servicing where we don't want to. It also deals with things like allowing small-scale energy systems. Drought-resistant landscaping is becoming more and more important. Water reuse, and working towards zero waste. Arts and culture, key one that came up with that along with the branding was really streamlining our event permitting, making that much easier for communities to move forward on events and reduce some of the barriers to that. Planning for climate change, so needing a climate action plan, and that would be something we'd need to update on a regular basis. Restricting development in hazard areas. So where we'll see issues in a place like Sechelt will be shoreline erosion, rising sea levels, extreme weather, wildfire hazard, that sort of thing, of just making for more resilient communities by doing things a little bit differently. Sustainable community growth and development, limiting sprawl, again, focusing development in serviced areas. And this will show up as well in our new zoning bylaw of lot sizes and ability to intensify, the ability to do additional units, whether it's secondary suites or accessory units, of being clear when it's in a serviced area. You have a lot more flexibility around that. And so making that delineation between serviced and non-serviced a little more apparent. An area, too, that I would like to do more work on and bring before council is what a logical density strategy looks like. Density isn't an end in itself, or rather a means. It's a means to an end. And so it's getting clear on how are we getting benefits. It needs to be in the right place. It needs to be contributing to a more walkable, inclusive community. Simply densifying areas that don't make sense do not buy you anything. So I'll do a little bit more work on that and have a strategy for it. Leadership in sustainability, so establishing sustainability as a core value. So this is where it really starts to affect decision making. Sometimes if it's just bottom line and short term, it's one way to look at things, but when you start looking at it longer term, particularly in facilities where as the owner and operator, you're going to realize those benefits of if we're doing something that reduces the energy load on a building. Monitoring the implementation, so the monitoring program will come in. And a key part of this, too, is a new sustainability checklist. And so this applies to primarily to development, but it can also be our development or our facility development. It got restructured from the existing one to make it a lot easier, both to the applicants, but also to the decision makers. Sometimes I've seen in some sustainability checklists, it's not really affecting our decision making well enough, and it's too vague to really determine whether this is actually moving towards sustainability or not. So it's trying to align it with a number of our policies, and is it moving you forward? So I think it should be a lot easier to read, and for the applicants a lot easier to negotiate or to navigate. So some of the key issues for implementation, the climate change and mitigation, water security. Key one, housing availability and affordability, improved growth management, and integrating sustainability into decision making. So on our next steps, we're going to have the, we have your say online input that's going live very shortly. We'll have the public open house December 6th at the Seaside Center. From that, we'll finalize the plan and bring it forward to you for consideration of adoption. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions by council? Councillor McLean. You guys are taking turns.
Okay. So thank you for all the work that's been done on this. It is so much better than the previous version. I think it's at a really good level. It's not too high, not too in the weeds. It's somewhere that we can aspire to work towards, and somewhere that I hope the community can pick up and work together with the district on it. One comment I wanted to make more for the community is that in this open house, please bring up ideas that you think are missing from this. And one particular weakness that I'm seeing right now is the arts and culture section. I think that's a critical part of Sechelt, and it's very events focused right now. And arts and culture is much more than events. So I'd encourage the public to come to that open house on December 6th and provide more ideas, and we can incorporate that into the final version. I'll pass it off to you. Yeah.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I'd like to echo Councillor McLean's comments and gratitude. Both he and I sat on that committee at different times, and from what I understand, it was a bit like trying to herd cats. So I see that we've got two other members of the committee here in the gallery. It's a long process, and it's been a long ways coming, and you did a fabulous job on reworking it into something that we can actually go forward with and use. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Okay, so now a question for staff. The last part of the document, the sustainability checklist. I'm unclear on how exactly that will be used. So like the example I have, a development comes in, one checks most of the boxes, one checks very few of them. So what? Like, where is the teeth in this? And I just not quite sure.
I think as you as council work with it, is that helping you at all? Is it not? And we can have that discussion.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions by council? Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I was just wondering, it doesn't show a time anywhere. What time was the thing on December 6th? From December 6th? What?
So the December 6th open house will be 3:30 to 6:30 at the Seaside Center.
I think they staff put it in our calendar already, so I think if you look there, it'll be there. Okay. Thank you. So next, let's move on to 11.1. Oh, first of all, could we get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation? It's a nice summary of this and can be used then to help us pull through. Thank you. Okay, so 11.1, council reports. I'm going to start on our far right. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Let me just find my report. I wasn't expecting to go first, so there we go. I guess this is my first official council report. I want to thank everyone who came out to the inaugural council meeting and everyone who's taken time out of their day to talk to me and talk to us, either in our places of business or out on the street. I'm excited to get to work with this council and the wonderful staff that we have here at this time. We've been doing orientations and workshops both here at the District of Sechelt and up the hill at the SCRD. Some of the days of training are starting to run together, but it's all very important. I'm learning how to do this job, and I hope to keep learning every day for the next 4 years. A great example of some of the things I've been doing when not in an orientation or training session is what I was up to on Friday. In the morning, we had an orientation up at the SCRD. In the afternoon, Councillor Rowe and I went on a tour of one of the SCRD wastewater treatment plants. In that case, it was a facility that's in a bit of a trouble, and they're not quite sure why yet. That evening, I was fortunate enough to be a guest at my daughter's Cub Scout camp, where I was asked to speak on the role of council when it comes to our local government and passing bylaws. I also gave the kids a candy-based lesson on taxation, which was a lot of fun because, hey, candy. The Cubs are working on their citizenship badges right now, and hopefully they'll be coming to present to us here at council sometime in the next month or two. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
This has been a learning curve. This is, as Councillor Toth said, we've been in a ton of training sessions, and it's a fire hose of information, and I thank the staff for their support and patience as we kind of maybe ask the stupid questions, but I believe that any question is worthwhile. So learning all this information and the reading packages and balancing my other full-time job is becoming lots of fun. I got to attend the Remembrance Day ceremony and got pulled into the parade, which wasn't expected, but thank you. And various other events I managed to get to. So unfortunately, I didn't get to present to any scouts, but going forward, I will definitely plan on being at other events that come up. Thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Well, everything they said is true, and I echo that. Those comments, especially around thanks to staff for the last 2 days and staff at the SCRD for the 3 days of orientation that we've had up there. I attended the Homelessness Committee meeting on behalf of Mayor Seegers. So that was sort of my first official duty, I suppose. And it was, I work in healthcare, so I deal with homeless people a lot. And it was really interesting to actually sit at a table with Nick from Rain City, who's now in a management position, and just hear how far they've come actually in the relatively short time that they've been here. So I thought I'd just share a little bit of that. Right now at the shelter, they're turning 10 to 15 people away a day. They are working on finalizing a project that will provide a winter shelter in Gibsons again at Christ the King. So they're just trying to finalize that agreement. They are actually employing 35, they have 35 employees now on the Sunshine Coast, and they're all local residents, and they're all decent paying jobs. So I was pretty impressed by that. There's a lot of work being done around harm reduction. Some grants have been received by, or in the process of, hopefully, by various organizations for a community action team and a poverty law advocate, and those two positions are going to bring a lot of assistance to some of the marginalized people in our community. So we are all looking forward to the supportive housing project starting what they expect to break ground in spring. And if anybody doesn't know the story about the plan, the supportive housing units are going to be built on a barge, it sounds like on the Fraser River, and then barged up here. And they expect actually ground to, or shovel to being ready to go in to be around 8 weeks, which was pretty interesting. Yeah. So that was the homelessness committee. I attended Remembrance Day as well, and was part of the organization of the Black Boot this last weekend, when raised about $10,000 for the Ruby Slipper Fund that supports local residents going through cancer diagnosis. So that's what's kept me busy outside of council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so like mentioned earlier, I got to go to the Housing Central conference earlier this week. So I'm going to share a couple key findings from that. I have, for council, I'll get an email out once they give me more materials, so you guys can find out everything that I was able to learn. Couple key points, key documents that I need to read about housing. There seems to be a lot of support from the provincial and federal governments. They both have their housing strategies well in development. At the conference, the Premier was there, so was the provincial housing minister and the federal housing minister. So it's really a sign of support from these upper levels of government. So yeah, they both have their strategies. And then I found a really interesting program for social investment for affordable housing. So that's getting people in the community to invest in affordable housing programs, which I think could be a really innovative solution to get some financing for that. A couple sessions were from BC Housing. They kind of touched on two key triggers to be able to get more funding from BC Housing. One was available land. They like it when you own land. And the other was responsive staff. When they have a question, they want to be able to get a quick response from staff. And if they have that, they can work quicker and more receptive with our community. I have a couple, there's funding available for seed funding for developing housing projects, which I think could be pretty exciting for this community. I'm going to take probably a little course, Ready, Set, Build, about developing housing projects. But the one I'm really excited about is the Housing Hub from BC Housing. So this is a new funding program for affordable rental and affordable home ownership. They kind of have two branches, and the main premise is that they access funding by taking out loans against the provincial government. So the really cool thing is that they can provide loans for much lower interest rates than the banks can. And these loans can go to essentially anyone. Municipalities, not-for-profits, churches, private developers, if they are building affordable housing, either rental or ownership. So I think that those could be really exciting, and if anyone wants to learn more about that, I need to do a bit more reading, but I'd be happy to talk to anyone thinking of getting a housing project going and accessing these funding streams. It could be really big for our community. And yeah, I'll be in touch with council with all the slides and such.
Thank you very much. Sounds like it was fascinating.
It was really good.
Councillor Lamb.
Just basically been working on strategic planning at the SCRD and the District of Sechelt, and getting to know the staff here at the District of Sechelt, which has been a pleasure so far. And then getting to know the other councillors here. So so far, everything's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, we're finding out who's got a sense of humor and who doesn't, right? Councillor Kuster. Yeah, popcorn, right?
Thank you. I again would like to thank the staff for putting up with all the questions and how do I work my computer. It's been a big learning curve, and everyone's been so accommodating, and it's been great. For what I've done, I did attend the Remembrance Day ceremony as well with most of the councillors that have been here. And I had the opportunity to go to the Downtown Business Association meeting the other night, which was really interesting. They had Deb Hensby from Senco Developments there, and she kind of outlined what the Sechelt Nation had kind of in place and plans for the next 3 to 5 years. First thing was the development of their, up by your independent grocer. They've got some, Tim Hortons is going in, and they've got some other larger big chains signed up, but she won't tell us who yet. But that's her first phase, and once that's complete, they are going to move down to the lot next to Ravenscry and work on retail below, and then housing, I think she said 34 units above. And third phase is their marina and harborfront. So they're going to be developing that and moving forward with that kind of from Selma Park Road down. And also she talked about an outdoor area, like a public space at the end of phase 3 for them, and developing right basically down from Selma Park down to the corridor, and possibly moving their band office for development. So that was really interesting. They've got a lot on the go, lots of plans. For our Downtown Business Association, there was talk about moving the farmers market to a new location due to multiple reasons. Parking was brought up by someone, and and also some residents, because of trying to get in and out of their properties. It's been an issue. So that was one thing they talked about. And Oktoberfest, they actually did quite well at Oktoberfest. They came up in positive. It was a great opportunity and a nice event for our downtown. The art crawl they talked about, it was a really good success, but they were talked about capping the current number they have, because it's just manageable at the number they have right now, not trying to increase it. What else did they talk about? Recruitment. They're also working on a coupon book, what should be ready for December, with some local businesses putting in some different deals for consumers. And they're working on a banner project with the Sechelt Nation, which was really interesting. And they've got them to do some artwork. And one successful thing they did was the Turn Down the Heat, where they actually got 936 coats, which was pretty awesome for this time of year. It was really good. They briefly mentioned the sustainability plan, and Tracy, for all your work that was mentioned. That was really good. And just talking about how parking is an issue downtown, and they're looking at some lots that maybe become available to utilize for parking. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody's been thanking staff, so I guess I should do it too. I mean, learning curve for me has been steep too, and I want to thank you all for your patience. So we have been spending the last 2 weeks in orientation sessions, both the District of Sechelt and the SCRD. As you've heard by now, I think it was in the paper or on Facebook or somewhere, I was elected as vice chair at the regional district, and I'll be supporting Lori Pratt as chair and the other directors. I'm also the chair of the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee, so I'll be chairing another meeting tomorrow morning there. So after one of those meetings, I actually was fortunate enough to drop in on a meeting or a workshop hosted by the Early Years Group here on the Sunshine Coast. At the end of the meeting, in a side conversation, we discussed daycare in Sechelt. So the YMCA has $500,000 in a grant that they received from the provincial government to do some renovations in Sechelt Elementary over here. When they actually got in to start looking at doing those renovations, they found the cost was much higher. The provincial government has actually reworked that grant, and now the grant limit has been raised to $1 million. So they're going back to see if they can get some additional funds to do the renovations they need to do in Sechelt Elementary. That would give us 49 daycare spots for ages 0 to 5 in Sechelt. So we'll keep tabs on that and find out if we can actually assist in any way to make that, to help that move forward. I want to mention the 100 Women Who Care. We had a meeting Monday night, and we gave $4,000 to the YMCA on Monday night. And we'll be gathering up about another 2,800, as we have 68 members now in our group. So that's my report as on council here. I just wanted to do a brief report on the SCRD, and what we're going to be doing going forward is we're looking at timing. We're going to, between Councillor Lamb and I, will actually do up a written report on the pieces at the regional district that are pertinent to Sechelt or Sechelt residents. So one of the things that came out at one of the sessions, and it's been posted on Facebook if you saw it on there, I know people are wondering what's happening with groundwater, with wells, etc. By the end of January 2019, they're anticipating that the results of the groundwater investigation will be back to the regional district. They are going to, in February 2019, they are going to come with some recommendations for water metering to the regional board, given that the AAP has failed. At the end of February 2019, they anticipate the feasibility study will be back for the raw water reservoir. And in March, they will be getting an update on the provincial permits for Chapman Lake project. So those are the dates right now that they have been provided with, or providing us with, and we wanted to get those to the community. Other than that, it's basically been orientation and, again, filling us in on where some of the projects and things are at the regional district at this point. I think we're going to start seeing probably next week new items coming forward, so we'll have stuff to report at that point. So next on our agenda is council correspondence, and this is for receipt. So I'd like a motion to receive the council correspondence. Councillor Toth, Councillor McLean, all those in favor. And then item number 4 indicates that council action is required. That's on page 322. They would like a letter of support for their application. What is council's wish? Okay, motion to provide a letter. Thank you. Second, all in favor? Okay, we'll have staff draft that and we'll get that out. Are there any other items that you'd like to make mention of? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I'd like to quickly discuss the letter from Minister Trevena.
Okay, what would you like to talk about?
So just briefly summarizing, the minister has said that there isn't sufficient traffic volume on the Sunshine Coast to produce a bypass, which frankly is pretty disappointing. If I could find this.
Page 312.
Thank you. There's one comment in there that they're willing to work with local communities on identifying safety issues.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if there is any action that we can do to identify those safety issues a bit more actively and keep this issue forward, because I don't want this letter to be the end of this issue.
Okay, so I know that this group, Sunshine Coast Highway 101 group, will be going to speak with either the minister or the deputy minister, and what they will be stressing will be safety when they do their presentation. And they're still collecting signatures. The date hasn't been set. It was to have been the night of our inauguration, or the day of our inauguration, or inaugural meeting, sorry, but that didn't happen then, so they're still waiting for that date. And that is something that they can stress with the minister. As a council, I think that's something that we could potentially put together and take forward when we go forward with our meetings coming up this fall. In the spring with AVICC, and then put some more meat behind it potentially and take it to UBCM and set up meetings with the ministers at that point. Okay, so keep it on your radar and we'll move that forward then. Any others? Okay, I'd like a motion to receive the Sechelt Visitor Services statistics for October 2018. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any questions? Councillor McLean.
To staff, I was wondering if we had an update on the contract status of the visitor center.
Thank you, Your Worship. The manager of communications will be bringing a report to the next committee of the whole in-camera meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any emergency items from staff? All right. I'd like a motion to adjourn then, please. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Yes, thank you. We made it. All right, questions from the gallery. Pam.